You know, it is, it's actually fascinating how much of our approach to learning as adults is just, well, completely held hostage by the way we were taught as kids.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, we're totally trapped by it.
Right. Like if you look at how traditional language learning is structured today, it is, I mean, it's almost indistinguishable from a mathematics class.
That is such a good way to put it, yeah.
You sit down, you open a textbook, and you are presented with this massive, complicated architecture.
It's just huge, daunting system.
Exactly. You're basically told to lay this pristine foundation of like alphabet drills and then pour the heavy concrete of basic vocabulary.
And then, spend literally years welding together the heavy steel beams of grammar rules.
Yes, years. The instructor points to a chalkboard covered in, I don't know, verb conjugations, and they point out, like, the pluperfect tense.
The dreaded pluperfect.
Right, and they essentially say, hey, memorize this complex matrix, and eventually, one day in the distant future, you might actually be granted permission to speak.
It's wild when you think about it.
It really treats language like a dead artifact to be dissected rather than, a living tool to just be used.
Well, and it stems directly from how we historically taught Latin and ancient Greek.
Oh, really? Like the classical education model.
Exactly.
Right.
Because, those were dead languages, right? So the only way to interact with them was through translation and this rigorous, intense grammatical analysis.
Because you're not exactly going to bump into a Roman centurion at the local coffee shop.
Right. You're not asking him for a napkin. So the whole academic model was built around analyzing text.
Ah, I see.
But the tragedy here is that we took that exact same, autopsy-based approach and applied it to living, breathing, modern languages.
Well, you just copy-pasted it.
We did. We convinced entire generations of learners that to simply speak to someone, they first needed a degree in linguistics.
And it creates this incredible illusion of progress, doesn't it?
Oh, definitely. A very safe illusion.
Yeah, because you stare at the textbook, you perfectly categorize the difference between, say, a gerund and an infinitive in your notebook, and you feel safe.
You feel productive.
Right. You feel like you are mastering the language without ever having to actually risk sounding foolish out loud.
Which is the scariest part for most people.
But then, and we've all been here, you step into the real world. You walk up to a native speaker, you open your mouth, and that beautiful, perfect grammatical skyscraper you built in your head, it just collapses into dust.
Just total demolition.
You freeze. You are standing there agonizing over the correct past participle, and the person you are talking to has, already glanced at their watch and walked away.
Yeah, we call that instructional paralysis.
Instructional paralysis. I like that.
It's a real phenomenon. The cognitive load required to mentally reference a grammar table while simultaneously trying to, interpret the facial expressions of the person standing right in front of you.
That sounds exhausting.
It is. It's simply too high for the human brain to manage in real time.
Which brings us to our mission for today. We're looking at a set of source materials that completely reject that classical academic methodology we just talked about.
They throw it right out the window.
They really do. So, for you listening, we are diving into excerpts from a book called The Essential Guide to Natural Everyday English Sentences.
Specifically, we're analyzing a methodology presented in an audio series called English with Ava.
Right. Episode 36, to be exact, which focuses on 100 common English sentences.
It's a very specific, very targeted approach.
It is. And our goal today is to deeply deconstruct this framework. We are going to explore why this source champions what I would call, let's call it lexical chunking.
Lexical chunking,
That's
yeah.
fair.
Learning entire practical sentences.
Exactly. Choosing that over traditional grammar rules. We're going to examine how it breaks down everyday human communication into this fascinating 5-step modular architecture.
And critically, we're going to see if their prescribed method for actually, installing these phrases into your brain holds up under scrutiny.
Okay, let's unpack this. The source immediately drops us into a dialogue between two figures in the text, Ava and Alex. And Alex establishes the core philosophy right out of the gate.
The statement he makes is essentially the thesis for their entire pedagogical approach.
Yeah, I'll quote it directly just so we have the baseline here. So Alex says, instead of memorizing difficult grammar rules, it's much more helpful to learn common English sentences you can use every day.
And Ava immediately backs this up.
Right. She asserts that practicing these useful, intact sentences is the actual mechanism that builds natural, confident speech.
They are explicitly telling the listener, basically, do not learn the rules. Learn the scripts.
Learn the scripts.
Yeah. Because if you consider the stark contrast in the terminology used there, Alex deliberately juxtaposes memorizing difficult grammar rules with learning sentences you can use every day.
He's drawing a really hard line there.
A very hard line.
Right.
Between, like, academic storage and immediate practical application.
It's a huge shift in mindset.
It is. And the implication is profound if you actually think about the psychology of language. This source is arguing that language is not this abstract puzzle to be solved.
It's a utility.
Exactly. When a learner is trapped in that grammar mindset, they are experiencing what the linguist Stephen Krashen calls the monitor hypothesis.
Oh, the monitor hypothesis. Break that down for us.
So basically, they have this internal editor, a monitor, constantly scanning their own speech for errors before they even vocalize it.
Right. It's that internal critic that says, wait, is it he or he goes? Stop talking until you figure it out.
Exactly. And that internal monitor, it consumes all your available bandwidth.
So you just freeze up.
Yeah. By the time you have successfully conjugated the verb in your head, the conversational moment has completely vanished. The other person has moved on.
The moment is gone. So by shifting the focus to learning the entire sentence as a single unbroken unit of meaning, you just bypass that processing delay entirely.
That's the brilliance of it. You aren't building a sentence from scratch using raw materials.
You are simply retrieving a fully assembled product right off the shelf.
Exactly.
Let me try to contextualize this. It's like the difference between learning to play a song on the guitar by studying standard sheet music versus just looking up the guitar tabs online.
Oh, that's a great analogy.
Right. Because if you study the sheet music, you have to understand the time signature. You have to know what a C major triad is actually composed of.
The underlying math of the music.
Yeah, you have to understand the mathematical intervals between the notes. It takes months before you can play a recognizable tune.
You're studying the theory.
Exactly. But if I just hand you a piece of paper that says, put your first finger on the second string and your middle finger on the fourth string and strum, you're playing a C chord in 3 seconds.
You don't know why it's a C chord, necessarily.
Nope. You don't know the theory, but you are making music on day one.
The output is the goal, not the underlying theory. However, I will say, the caveat to your guitar analogy is that eventually, if you want to write your own complex symphonies, you might hit a plateau without the theory.
Sure, yeah, if you want to be Mozart.
Right. But what this source understands deeply is that most language learners do not want to write symphonies.
No, they really don't.
They want to order a coffee. They want to ask for directions. They want to survive a business meeting without sweating through their shirt.
Just basic survival.
And what is fascinating here is how it fundamentally alters the learner's relationship with making mistakes.
I would actually argue it redefines what failure even means in this context.
Oh, so?
Well, think about it. If your goal is grammatical perfection, a mistake is a failure of logic. You applied the rule wrong. You get an F on the test.
Right. The system says you are incorrect.
But if your goal is purely communicative success, like, did the other person understand my intent? Then a grammatical error is completely irrelevant as long as the message lands.
It lowers the effective filter.
The effective filter.
Yeah, that is a concept in language acquisition regarding the emotional variables. Things like anxiety, self-doubt, boredom, fear of looking stupid.
Which we all have.
And those emotions actually prevent learning. When the pressure to be perfect is removed, the learner's anxiety drops, and their ability to just absorb the language actually increases.
So they learn faster because they aren't terrified.
Exactly. The interaction itself becomes the dopamine reward rather than, acing a written test.
I hear that, and I love the psychology of it, but let's be realistic about this for a second.
Okay, play devil's advocate.
If we just throw out the grammar books and rely solely on learning whole sentences, we run into a massive logistical problem.
Which is?
You cannot just memorize random sentences out of a dictionary and hope they apply to your life. The selection process becomes the most critical element.
Yes. You need the right tabs for the song you actually want to play.
Exactly. And that takes us directly into the framework this source provides. They haven't just given a random list. They have mapped out this sequential 5-step architecture for a conversation.
They are essentially providing the pre-compiled code for standard social interactions.
Let's examine the first 2 steps of this, which deal entirely with the initiation of contact.
The opening news.
Right. So step 1 is labeled greeting people. And the source offers 2 foundational examples. How are you today? And It's nice to meet you.
Classic openers.
Then they immediately transition into step 2, which is asking simple questions. Here they showcase phrases like, can you help me? And what do you mean?
Okay, the pivot to utility.
Yeah, but I want to stop right here because honestly, on the surface, this feels incredibly pedestrian.
It does seem very basic.
It feels almost too obvious to even warrant a deep dive. Like, how are you today is quite literally page 1 of every phrase book on planet Earth.
It seems pedestrian because we, as native speakers, are entirely blind to the complex sociological dance happening when those words are spoken.
What do you mean by that? A dance?
Well, we need to look at greetings not as information exchanges, but as phatic expressions.
Phatic expressions.
Yes, that is a term coined by the anthropologist Bronislaw Malinowski. Phatic communication is language used for the general purposes of social interaction, rather than to convey actual, literal information.
Wait, let me challenge that. Are you suggesting that when this framework teaches how are you today, it is intentionally teaching a hollow phrase?
It depends on how you define hollow.
Because if I ask someone how they are and they start giving me like a detailed medical update about their lower back pain, the social contract feels broken.
Completely broken, yes.
So are these phrases just empty passwords?
Empty implies they lack value. I prefer the term utilitarian passwords.
Utilitarian passwords. Okay, I like the sound of that.
Because they are incredibly valuable. They perform a vital function. They establish safety.
Safety, like physical safety.
In terms of evolutionary psychology, yes. When you approach a stranger, there's an inherent spike in tension.
Right, the stranger danger instinct.
Exactly. How are you today is the linguistic equivalent of showing your empty hands to prove you aren't holding a weapon.
Oh, wow. That's a powerful way to look at it.
It is a social lubricant that opens the channel of communication. It signals, hey, I recognize your presence, I am adhering to our shared cultural norms, and I am not a threat.
So the language learner isn't actually asking a question about the person's day. They are executing a handshake protocol.
Precisely. And once that handshake protocol is accepted by the other person, you can move safely to step 2, which is where the actual utility begins.
Right, going from, how are you, to, can you help me?
Which is a massive shift in vulnerability.
Because you're asking for something.
You go from just recognizing a shared space to explicitly demanding resources, be it their time, their knowledge, or their effort.
That makes a lot of sense. Now, I am looking closely at the other phrase they highlight in step 2, which is, what do you mean?
Yes, a crucial phrase.
To me, out of everything in this initial phase, that is the most critical sequence of words a learner could possibly memorize.
I would agree with that.
Because if how are you is the password to get into the building, what do you mean, is like the emergency brake on the elevator.
It functions as a metacognitive strategy.
Expand on that a bit.
So, when you are learning a language, the greatest fear is the avalanche.
The avalanche.
That moment when the native speaker responds to your simple question with this massive torrent of vocabulary you don't understand, spoken at a speed you just can't process.
Oh, yeah. The instinct is to just freeze, panic, and nod along while understanding absolutely nothing.
We've all done the fake nod.
You just smile and nod and internally pray they didn't just ask you a direct question.
We all have. But arming the learner with, what do you mean, gives them the power to stop the avalanche.
It's a strategic retreat.
It forces the native speaker to recognize the communication breakdown, to slow down, and to find simpler synonyms.
It transfers the heavy lifting back to the native speaker.
Exactly. It gives the learner's brain a crucial few seconds to recalibrate. It keeps the learner in the game instead of forcing them to just throw in the towel and forfeit.
Okay, so we have used our password to initiate contact, and we have deployed our emergency brake to ensure we actually understand what is happening. We are in the thick of the conversation now.
The tricky part.
Right. And this brings us to step 3 and step 4 of the sources framework, which really delves into the pragmatics of interaction.
The glue that holds it all together.
Step 3 is labeled everyday expressions. This features phrases like no problem, that sounds great, and I understand.
Very common fillers.
And then step 4 focuses on speaking politely, which upgrades previous requests to sentences like, could you please help me, and thank you so much.
This is where we transition from basic survival mechanics to actual pragmatic competence.
Pragmatic competence.
Yes, linguistic competence is just knowing the words. Pragmatic competence is knowing how to use those words appropriately in a specific social context.
Here's where it gets really interesting for me, The shift that stands out most prominently here is that subtle upgrade they do in step 4.
The shift from can to could.
Yes.
Yeah.
Earlier, in step 2, the source gave us the highly direct, can you help me? But now they introduce, could you please help me?
It seems minor, but it's not.
That transition from can to could might seem like a minor grammatical footnote, but in terms of social capital, it is massive.
If we connect this to the bigger picture, it is the difference between a demand and a negotiation.
A demand versus a negotiation.
In linguistics, we talk a lot about politeness theory, heavily developed by researchers Penelope Brown and Stephen Levinson.
Okay.
A core concept there is saving face. When you ask someone for help, you are threatening their negative face, which is basically their desire to be unimpeded and free to just go about their day.
So if you just walk up to a stranger on the street and say, can you help me? It is abrupt. It is a direct imposition.
It feels entitled.
Yeah, it assumes they actually have the time and the obligation to assist you right then and there.
Right. But by shifting the modal verb from can to could, and by adding please, you are introducing social distance and deference.
You're softening the blow.
You are acknowledging the imposition. You are giving them the psychological space to decline.
And paradoxically, by giving them the space to say no, they become vastly more likely to say yes.
Exactly. Politeness isn't just about being a nice, warm person. It is a highly calculated strategy to reduce friction and get what you want out of the interaction.
So the source isn't just teaching grammar here. It is literally teaching social engineering.
Bang on. It's giving them the tools to manipulate the social environment safely.
I want to look back at step 3 for a second, those everyday expressions, the no problem, the I understand, that sounds great.
The conversational filler?
I like to think of these phrases as the shock absorbers of a conversation.
Oh, shock absorbers. Expand on that.
So if you think about a conversation as a vehicle moving down a road, it is very rarely a smooth ride on fresh asphalt. Right?
True. There are always bumps.
There are constantly potholes, people mishear each other, someone steps on someone else's sentence, there are awkward pauses.
The natural friction of talking.
Yeah. If a conversation was just two people exchanging cold, hard facts like, the sky is blue, yes, I need to buy milk, it would be an incredibly jarring, bumpy ride. You would feel exhausted after 2 minutes.
It would feel like an interrogation.
Exactly. But these little phrases act as the suspension system. If someone bumps into you and says, sorry, you immediately deploy the shock absorber. No problem.
It absorbs the kinetic energy of the awkwardness.
Exactly. It prevents the interaction from stalling out.
In linguistic terms, you were describing something called back-channeling.
Back-channeling.
Yeah. It is the continuous secondary feedback we provide while someone else is speaking to show that we are actively engaged in the exchange.
Like when I say right or yeah while you're talking.
Exactly. Saying that sounds great or I understand isn't necessarily about conveying deep, factual truth. When you say I understand, you might not understand the deep existential nuance of their story, right?
Right. I'm just trying to keep the flow going.
You're simply signaling, I am tracking with the flow of your narrative. Please continue.
But doesn't that reinforce the idea that we are just kind of operating on autopilot?
How do you mean?
Like, if I am just throwing out, that sounds great, like a robot dispensing a parking ticket, am I even having a real conversation?
You are touching on a very deep philosophical debate in linguistics right now.
Really?
Oh, yeah. How much of our daily speech is actually spontaneous, novel creation, and how much is just us regurgitating prepackaged social scripts?
That's a little terrifying to think about.
The studies actually suggest that a massive percentage of native speech is entirely formulaic. We don't build sentences word by word. We strain together these prefabricated chunks.
So we are all kind of robots.
Sort of. So the learner isn't being taught to act like a robot. They're being taught to mimic the highly efficient, semi-automated way native speakers actually converse with one another.
Because it saves mental energy.
Exactly. It saves energy for the moments when you do need to express a complex, original thought.
Which brings us to the moment where that mental energy is usually completely, utterly depleted. The end of the interaction.
Hardest part.
Step 5 in the sources framework is dedicated entirely to ending conversations. They highlight phrases like, it was nice talking to you, and see you later.
And it's brilliant that they explicitly include this.
I find it incredibly validating that they dedicate a full 20% of their structural model to just figuring out how to walk away from someone.
The psychology of the conversational exit is notoriously fraught. It is difficult for native speakers. It is utterly paralyzing for a language learner.
Think about the times in your own native language where you have been trapped.
Oh, we've all been there.
You are at a networking event, or you run into an acquaintance at the grocery store. The core information has been exchanged. The conversation has completely flatlined.
The awkward silence descends.
Yes. But neither of you knows how to execute the exit protocol without seeming rude. So you just stand there, awkwardly bringing up the weather, trapped in this linguistic purgatory, just waiting for the other person to pull the ripcord.
It's agonizing.
Now, magnify that universal dread by a factor of 10 for someone operating in a second language.
The fear of that exact scenario, the inability to escape gracefully, is what often prevents learners from initiating step one in the first place.
Oh, that makes total sense.
If you don't know how to get out of the pool, you are never going to jump in.
Wow.
The reason exiting is so difficult is because it inherently threatens the social bond you just spent the last 4 steps building up. You were effectively saying, I no longer wish to interact with you.
That sounds brutal when you put it like that.
Which is why we rely so heavily on highly ritualized leave-taking scripts.
Leave-taking scripts.
Yeah, it was nice talking to you. It's a brilliant piece of social technology. It validates the interaction, assuring the person that the time spent was valuable, while simultaneously signaling that the time spent is now over.
It softens the blow of the departure.
Exactly. By handing the learner these explicit phrases, the source is offering them a safety net. It restores their autonomy. They know they can pull the parachute whenever they feel overwhelmed.
So we have the complete blueprint now.
We have all the pieces.
We have the phatic greetings to open the channel. We have the simple questions to extract information and, hit the emergency brake.
Right.
We have the polite modifiers to save face, the expressions to absorb the conversational shocks, and the ritualized exits to escape safely.
The whole arc.
The source material actually synthesizes this by providing a full, continuous dialogue between the two figures, Alex and Ava. Let me map out the exact sequence they use to show how these pieces interlock in real time.
The practical application of the theory.
Exactly. So it flows like this. Alex initiates the handshake. Hi, Ava. How are you today? Ava completes the handshake and reflects it back. I'm doing great. Thanks for asking. How about you?
Standard. Step 1.
Alex acknowledges, I'm doing well too. Then he pivots to step 2, the vulnerability. Can you help me with something?
The ask.
Ava deploys the step 3 shock absorber and invites the request. Of course. What do you need? Alex makes the specific demand. Can you explain this English sentence? And Ava wraps the sequence with step 4 politeness. Sure, I'd be happy to help.
If you look at that transcript from the perspective of, say, a software engineer, it is a perfect example of modular programming.
Modular programming. What's the connection there?
Well, there is no messy, tangled code in that exchange. In software design, you don't write a single massive block of code to run a whole program. You write small, independent modules that perform specific functions, and then you just call those modules when you need them.
Oh, I see.
The dialogue between Alex and Ava doesn't feature them inventing new ways to express their internal emotional states. They're simply calling pre-compiled modules.
Like Lego bricks.
Exactly. Alex needs to initiate, so he calls the greeting module. He needs assistance, so he calls the inquiry module.
It is entirely plug and play.
It is. And the beauty of this modular architecture for a language learner is that it drastically reduces the infinite complexity of human interaction down to a finite, manageable set of choices.
It makes it possible.
If Alex had tried to use traditional grammar translation to form his request, his internal monologue might have been, okay, I need to express a desire for assistance in the immediate future regarding a specific linguistic problem.
Yeah.
Do I use the present continuous? How do I conjugate the verb to assist?
And by the time he figures it out, Ava has already walked away.
Exactly. Instead, he just drops in the pre-assembled chunk. Can you help me with something?
It totally demystifies the act of speaking. It strips away the artistic romance of language and replaces it with pure functional engineering.
Functional engineering is exactly what it is.
You don't need to be a poet. You just need to know which tool to pull from the belt. But this leads us to the most critical part of this entire deep dive.
How to actually learn it.
Right. Because it is one thing to look at this blueprint on paper and understand the logic. It is entirely another thing to move that blueprint from your cerebral cortex to your vocal cords.
The transition from declarative knowledge to procedural knowledge.
The source outlines a very specific practice task to achieve this. Here's the methodology they prescribe. First, you select 10 of these common sentences. Second, you are instructed to say each sentence aloud 3 times.
3 times aloud.
Third, you must use them in your own daily conversations. And Ava caps this off with the overarching directive. Fluency comes from using common English every day.
Okay.
I want to zero in on that middle step, saying it aloud 3 times, because on the surface, this sounds like the kind of hollow self-help gimmick you read on a motivational poster.
Right. Say it to the mirror 3 times and it becomes true.
Exactly. Is there actual hard neurological science backing up this specific directive, or is this just filler advice?
It is absolutely not filler, though I will say the specific number 3 might just be a convenient heuristic.
A nice round number.
Yeah, but the operative word in that instruction is aloud. We have to understand the profound difference between reading a sentence silently and speaking it physically.
Break that down.
When you read, you are engaging your visual cortex and Wernicke's area, which handles language comprehension. You are processing information passively. It is entirely internal.
You understand the meaning, but your body hasn't actually done anything.
Exactly. But speech is a highly complex, fine motor physical act.
Physical.
Very physical. When you are instructed to say a sentence aloud, you are forcing your brain to send signals through Broca's area, which handles speech production down to your diaphragm, your vocal cords, your tongue, your lips, and your jaw.
That is a lot of moving parts.
It requires incredibly precise, millisecond-level physical choreography. When you are learning a new language, you are literally asking the muscles in your face to move in ways they have never moved before, to produce phonemes that don't even exist in your native tongue.
So it is quite literally muscle memory. We throw that phrase around, but you were saying the mouth actually has to learn the dance steps.
It is the motor theory of speech perception. By repeating the phrase aloud, you are transitioning the language from declarative memory, which is your memory for facts, like knowing the capital of France, to procedural memory.
Which is what?
Procedural memory is your memory for physical skills, like riding a bicycle. You cannot learn to ride a bicycle by reading a book about physics.
No, you'd fall right over.
You have to get on the bike and pedal. Saying the phrase aloud 3 times in the safety of your own room is the training wheels. It builds the neural pathways so that when you need the phrase in the real world, your mouth knows how to form the shapes automatically without your conscious brain having to micromanage every single syllable.
Wow. There's also a massive psychological hurdle that this solo repetition addresses.
Oh, for sure.
I remember when I first started trying to learn Spanish, I understood the words on the page perfectly. But the first time I actually tried to order food out loud, I heard my own voice making these unfamiliar vowels and trilling R's, and I immediately felt like an imposter.
The imposter syndrome is so real.
I felt like I was wearing a ridiculous costume. The sheer shock of hearing my own voice sound so different caused me to stumble and completely lose my train of thought.
You experienced cognitive dissonance.
Yeah.
Your brain literally rejected the audio feedback it was receiving because it didn't align with your internal self-perception.
That makes total sense.
By practicing aloud alone, you are performing a form of exposure therapy. You are normalizing the acoustic reality of your own voice, speaking the target language. You're desensitizing yourself to the imposter syndrome before you ever face a native speaker.
Okay, but let me push back on the final leap they demand. The third step is to use them in your own conversations in the real world.
The big leap.
Ava says fluency comes from using it every day. I struggle to believe that repeating "what do you mean" 3 times in the sterile environment of my bedroom actually prepares me for the chaotic, unpredictable friction of a live conversation on a noisy street with a stranger who speaks way too fast.
It's a fair critique.
Is this framework overly optimistic about how easy that final transition is?
It is a colossal leap, yes, and the text might gloss over the sheer terror of that initial real-world application. However, their underlying mechanism is undeniably correct.
Go on.
The better repetition is merely the primer. It gets the engine turning over. But true fluency, the ability to access these modules instantly, is forged exclusively in the crucible of real-world friction.
Because the environment forces adaptation.
Because the human brain prioritizes information based on emotional resonance and utility.
Okay, tie that together for me.
If you repeat a phrase in your bedroom, there are no stakes. But if you deploy "can you help me" in a crowded train station because you are genuinely lost, and a stranger stops, smiles, and points you to your platform,
The relief you feel.
the dopamine rush of that successful social connection cements that phrase into your long-term procedural memory faster than 100 hours of textbook study.
Emotion is the glue.
The emotion is absolutely the clue. You will likely stumble the first time. You might freeze. But by the 10th time you deploy the module in the wild, the phrase ceases to be foreign code. It becomes an automatic reflex. It integrates into your actual personality.
It transitions from something you know to something you do.
Precisely. The blueprint here is brutally honest in its simplicity. The theory is useless without the kinetic friction of reality. You have to subject your precompiled modules to the unpredictable variables of human interaction.
So if we look back at the massive journey we have taken through this methodology today,
It's been quite the ride.
we started by dismantling the centuries-old academic obsession with grammar rules, recognizing how that monitor hypothesis creates a paralyzing cognitive load.
We threw out the textbooks.
We explored the genius of lexical chunking, learning entire functional sentences. We unpacked the five-step architecture, recognizing greetings as evolutionary handshake protocols, simple questions as emergency brakes,
Polite modifiers as face-saving social engineering.
expressions as conversational shock absorbers, and pre-plan exits as vital psychological safety nets.
A complete toolkit.
And finally, we examined the brutal, necessary transition from the declarative safety of vocal repetition to the procedural reality of the real world.
It is a comprehensive rejection of language as mathematics, reframing it entirely as a behavioral toolset. It prioritizes human connection over structural perfection.
It does. But as we wrap up this deep dive, digesting all of this leaves me with the rather provocative thought that I want you, sitting out there listening, to really sit with today.
Let's hear it.
We have spent this entire time praising the efficiency of treating language like modular programming, just trading these pre-packaged formulaic chunks back and forth. But if true fluency, as this text suggests, is achieved not by mastering the deep underlying logic of a language, but simply by memorizing and deploying the correct social scripts at the correct time.
What does that reveal?
Exactly. What does that actually reveal about the nature of human communication as a whole?
It is a deeply unsettling question if you value the romance of individuality.
Exactly. Are we, in our daily lives, actually generating original, unique thoughts when we speak? Or is the vast majority of our interaction just a sophisticated algorithm?
Are we just meat computers?
Right. Are we just trading these prefabricated conversational Lego bricks back and forth, scanning for passwords, deploying shock absorbers, executing exit protocols just to navigate the social maze and get our basic needs met?
It's a humbling thought.
Because if we can successfully maneuver through society just by deploying the right precompiled sentence at the right time, without ever understanding the mechanics underneath, it forces us to look in the mirror.
Yeah.
Are you, in your own life, your own career, your own relationships, overcomplicating your communication?
Overthinking every word.
Are you spending so much mental energy agonizing over constructing the perfect, grammatically flawless articulation of your thoughts that you are entirely missing the point?
The connection itself?
Perhaps the goal isn't to build a magnificent, complex skyscraper of words. Perhaps the goal is just to reach out, use the common script, and open the door. Thank you for exploring this with us. We'll see you on the next deep dive.